And who do we have next? I think it's Ellen. Oh, yeah, brilliant. I'll take that back. I won't catch it. Okay, so our next speaker is Ellen Mayer, who's an engagement consultant at Hearken. And Hearken is a journalism tech startup. So Ellen started her career in public radio, and she now works with newsrooms around the world, training them on the concept of public-powered journalism. And they range from small local newspapers to national broadcasters, including the BBC. And today, Ellen will talk about how 360 engagement leads to a much more loyal audience. Thank you, Ellen.
Great. All right, so that was a great introduction. I don't think there's much more I need to say about myself right now, but I am Ellen Mayer, and my company currently works with upwards of 80 newsrooms around the world. And like she said, the talk today is called How Unleashing the Power of 360-Degree Audience Engagement Can Help Build Your Brand. Something that I'm thinking about is yesterday we heard a lot about people saying it's just so important to have a trusted brand. That's what enables us to do what we do. We heard Vogue International talking about the fact that they're a trusted brand, and that's why they've been able to expand their platform, which is great. But I haven't so far heard anybody talk about how you earn that trust, what you do to become a trusted brand, if perhaps you're not sure you quite have that already. Or even if you do, but you need to keep showing your audience over and over, right? We've earned your trust, we've earned your attention. So you could also think of this today as not just how to build your brand, but how to build trust. And in my business, it really all comes down to building relationships. All of these things mean the same thing. They mean building relationships with your audience. So typically, publishers, newsrooms, traditionally their institutions create content and publish content in a way that looks a lot like this, or they have for a very long time, where you are up on a hill at a remove from your audience and you have access to information that they don't, and you shout it down to them. And everybody in this room is familiar with the fact that this model doesn't work anymore, and it doesn't work anymore for a number of reasons. I'm going to say one reason is that the way that your audience is experiencing this now, it doesn't matter if you've made a beautiful Instagram video. It doesn't matter if you have an incredibly important piece of news to deliver. Your audience is experiencing it just basically as you saying, listen to me, read me. And you're not the only one saying this, right? You're now in an incredibly packed media landscape in which everyone is yelling, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. And this is a nightmare for your brand, to just be one of these voices in the pack. And by the way, it's also a nightmare for your reader, for your consumer. Nobody enjoys this. Nobody likes the barrage of information. Nobody likes feeling like their attention is being called in every direction at once. In fact, it's giving all of us anxiety, right? It's bad for everyone. So the way that you are going to differentiate yourself from all of these other voices in the crowd is through 360-degree audience engagement. And you need to give your audience a reason, right, to read what you have created or to watch, to consume, to engage with you, a reason to share what you make, and ultimately a reason to care about your brand. You're not going to stand out, right, in this landscape unless you're giving your audience a really strong reason. So I'm going to break down now what I mean when I say 360-degree engagement. We'll start with the 360-degree part. The editorial process is cyclical. It's a circle. So when I talk about 360 degrees, I mean that everywhere you look and at every step of the process, you are going to be listening to your audience and collaborating with your audience. That's what 360-degree engagement looks like. So instead of each step looking something like this, where you're at a distance from your audience, it's going to look a lot more like this. And while all the other bozos in the industry, right, are still screaming, listen to me, you're going to be saying to your audience, I'm listening to you. And that already creates a huge transformation in the relationship that you have with your audience. So this is what Hearken does. The word Hearken literally means to listen. And our company helps news organizations listen to and collaborate with their audience at every step of the editorial process. And we have developed an editorial model to help newsrooms do this. I'm going to skip through here and get straight to the model. And we tested this out first as a radio show in Chicago at the public radio station there, and now we've taken it into a global model that newsrooms around the world can use. And the way that this process works is like this. At your pitch phase, your audience gets involved. You involve your audience by asking for their questions on a topic that you choose. So some of our newsrooms are niche publications, so they're asking for questions on things like global development. Some of our newsrooms are national, international broadcasters, so they're asking for questions about politics and global news. Some of our newsrooms are asking for questions about food and dining. So it really depends, and it can work in any format. But that's your first step, is that the pitch comes from your audience in the form of a question. The next step, the assignment phase, you, the journalist, the content creator, you locate the questions that you know are really great, that have really high editorial value. And you put, say, 3, maybe 4 of those up for a vote so that your audience actually gets that final say in assigning that story. And then ultimately in the reporting phase and the production phase, ideally you find some way to include the person who asked that winning question in your process and in the final story. So that's what we call the public-powered Hearken model, okay? And we are a tech company as well, so we have a software platform that supports this model. We have customizable, embeddable tools that go on your website, so it's not a separate platform. It's on your website, and it allows you to collect these questions along with things like your question asker's name and their email. It allows you to put their questions up for a vote, and it has we have an engagement management system that keeps all of this very organized and very efficient on a back end that's designed for journalists and content creators. So I've told you a little bit about how this model works in the abstract. Now I want to kind of walk you through what it looks like on the ground in a newsroom. So this is my friend Olivia. Olivia works at one of our partner newsrooms. It's a public radio station in San Francisco called KQED. And they have a series, a Hearken series called Bay Curious. And they report stories in response to audience questions about the Bay Area. So when they first launched this new series, their listener, Eric, saw it and said, yeah, you know what, I actually do have a burning question about my neighborhood. He was wondering, how come in the Mission District of San Francisco, people get away with double parking their cars, even though it's technically illegal? So he submits this question, and Olivia gets a notification. And she realizes, yeah, this is an interesting, smart, kind of unusual question that we can answer. It might make for a great story. But before she devotes any resources, right, to actually reporting and producing this story, she's going to double check and make sure that there really is demand for this story. So she picks 2 more questions that are really good, and she puts them all up for an audience vote on the website. And the audience overwhelmingly votes for Eric's question. So Olivia goes ahead, and she reports that story. And what she finds is that it performs significantly better than an average KQED story in terms of page views, in terms of time on site, and in terms of the number of comments that it receives on her website. And what Olivia learns from this experience is that her audience really cares about this story, right? We're talking about giving your audience a reason to care. And what she also learns is that the more she does it, the more she kind of continues this cycle and includes her audience in the process, she's going to give them more reasons to care. So we're going to talk a little bit now about kind of how Hearken provides your audience with the reason to care about your brand in particular. Here's some of the reasons that your audience has to read your story when you're using the Hearken model or something like it. A big reason is that maybe for the first time, they're seeing themselves represented in the news, or they're seeing people who look like them, their friends, their peers, represented in the news. That's an amazing reason to click and read a story. And also, you are producing and reporting incredibly unique and original stories because they're originating not from a traditional newsroom structure, right, but actually from the curiosity of your audience. And they think up their questions and story ideas in a very different way than journalists and content creators often do. So you'll notice that this is very different from the paradigm I spoke about at the beginning, where the reason that we're all giving our audience to click and read is that we're yelling, listen to me, and we're trying to yell louder than everybody else. This is not what that format looks like anymore. And it's not that you're trying to get ahead of the trends, because of course, you might end up with something like this, if that's the reason that you are giving your audience to read, and that certainly doesn't help you differentiate your brand. So no, actually what you're doing is you're creating original, relevant, and popular stories that people are invested in and want to read. And then you're also giving your audience a reason to engage with you. Of course, this whole model is predicated on the idea that people will engage, that they will submit their questions and they will vote, et cetera. But it's also built on the idea of a feedback loop. So the longer you do this, the more they will engage with you and continue to engage with you. So why? What reason are you giving them to do that? A big one is that they see from past stories you've done in this model that if they engage, they might get featured. They might have their name in your publication. They might have their face. They might be featured in a video. That's an amazing reason to want to engage with you. And that's certainly a great amount of social capital. They're seeing their peers engage, and they want to get in on it, kind of that FOMO principle. But really, ultimately, the biggest thing is that their engagement is genuinely transforming your work. It's not just, oh, we'll do some crowdsourcing over here, we'll ask for an opinion over here. We're really going to integrate your feedback, your questions into our process, and it's going to change what kinds of stories we report. It's meaningful, it feels meaningful to your audience. And it looks meaningful when you do feature your audience in your stories, when you bring them into your newsroom, when you bring them along to an interview, when you interview them. It really has an impact on the way that your audience perceives your brand. And then finally, the Hearken model gives your audience a reason to share. And this is a really big deal. The main reason why this whole process works and why it does help to build your brand is that by drawing your audience into the editorial process, they become stakeholders, right? They asked that question. They voted for that question. They have been a part of the process from the very beginning. So not only, of course, do they want to read, but they also want other people to read. And it's not just because they like you, but it's because of self-interest, right? They're a stakeholder, and this is very important because it means a piece of their identity is now actually tied up in your brand. And people really do become brand ambassadors. So this is an example from another one of our partners, a woman whose question was put into a voting round in that kind of assignment step, and she really wanted her question to win. So she told all of her friends over and over and over again, please vote for my question, please get involved in this WBZ, in this newsrooms process, so that my question can win. So those are all of the reasons that you're giving your audience to care about you. And now here's what you get when you do that. We talked about already, you're getting these very relevant, very unique, original stories. You're getting your authentic, targeted marketing from your brand ambassadors. And you're really getting brand loyalty. You're developing a core group of hyper-engaged readers, watchers, consumers who care about your brand because, again, they've become invested, they've become stakeholders. And out of that, what you also might get is lead generation for things like paid content, subscriptions, newsletters, memberships. And oftentimes you also get higher performing stories. So bringing this back around to this idea of how unleashing the power of this engagement in all directions, 360 degrees, can help you build your brand. I want to come back to this compass. You might have noticed at the beginning there was a fourth step over here to the west, I suppose, that wasn't filled in. And that fourth step is converting. So in this kind of editorial model where you're including your audience at every step of the process, there should be this fourth step where after you have drawn them in, gotten their questions, responded to their questions, valued them, made them feel like they're valued and they value you, then it is that much easier to convert people, right, to your paid subscriptions, to some other kind of paid content, to coming to paid events, to signing up for a newsletter, to coming over to Instagram, to moving over to whatever other platform you have. You have to earn that, right? That's what I talked about at the beginning. You don't just get trust. You have to earn it. And if you just come right out of the bat to your audience and you say, now I want you to pay for my thing, they might not be that into it. But if you've already gone through this whole cycle of involving them and making them feel valued and turning them into stakeholders, then you've really earned this step. So, yesterday once in your kind of gave us this doomsday prophecy, right? That if you are not in the year 2017 charging for your content, you're doomed. That's it. And 2017 is almost over. So this is one way that you could think about how do I get people over from being used to just experiencing all of this for free and move them into a paid space. So one of the ways that you do that, right, in the Hearken model or any other kind of 360-degree model is learning from your audience, from this data, that amazing data that they're giving you in the form of their questions, their needs, following up, creating follow-up steps. So after they've gone through this whole cycle, after they've voted for a question, after they've read that story, what next? Is there an event on this topic? Is there a newsletter they should be subscribing to? They're ready, they're primed, right, to continue to engage with you. So you have to be thinking about that follow-up step and be building relationships and sustaining your relationships. And then, of course, giving them the opportunities to convert and turning them into brand ambassadors. So I'm officially out of time, I think. Do we have any questions?
Well, I've got a few.
Yeah.
while you're having a quick think. I think that's really fascinating, and I can see how the model can kind of build up. How long does a media outlet have to keep doing this before they get to that point of, I guess, that tipping point of getting enough stories coming in and getting enough loyalty and getting all those benefits? Is it sort of a long, slow process to do that?
I mean, it's long and slow in the sense that you should be playing a long game, and you don't want to convert just one person, you want to convert hundreds, right? But I have an example of a newsroom that started doing this model, and I think the very first story that they ever did, the question asker was wondering, what happened to this local hot sauce that used to be made in this town? Why did that company close? They responded to his question. This was their very first story. And he responded to them. He was so thrilled that he showed up with gifts. He came to the newsroom carrying gifts because he was so excited that they answered his question. And he bumped up his membership. He started paying more money for membership to this local public radio station. So that's instantaneous, right?
Yes.
But it's instantaneous one-to-one. So to build a feedback loop, you want to be doing this for a couple of months and then hopefully, continue.
Okay, months,
Yeah.
I thought it was, examples of people doing it for years before they got to the volume, but
yeah,
no.
So we started this process at WBZ, which is a public radio station in Chicago, and they found, over the course of 1 year, Hearken brought in, when they were looking at the new leads that had come into their CRM, they figured out that 56% of those new leads came from Hearken, and that's just over the course of a year,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah. I can see exactly how this would work in a local publication or a local newspaper, local radio station. But have you got any examples where kind of like national magazine media, which perhaps are more talking about a specific audience, have adopted this kind of approach?
It's a great question, and the answer is that the magazine market is wide open. Anybody here could be the first adopter. We do work with national publications. As Carolyn mentioned, we do work with the BBC covering national news.
Yeah.
We work with a couple of niche publications. We work with a vertical that focuses on global development called Goats and Soda, and their readers are from around the world, really. And they've been very successful with this model as well, focusing in on questions related to the profession of global development. And we've seen, at a more local level, we have seen people doing things like culture, entertainment, food and dining that could certainly scale up very easily to a national or international brand.
Yeah. So any questions from the audience? Yeah, there's one over there. Hang on. Let me just try and get this across to you. And the trick, I'm going to throw it. Whoops, I throw it badly. The trick is to hold it near your mouth and speak into the black bit.
So as you were walking through the example from KQED,
Yes.
the sort of third step where when the story is being reported on, you talked about involving the person who how did that how does that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is it looks different depending on the publication. If it is a local publication, it might be very easy to just call up the person who asked, right, and say, we want to bring you along, we've got an interview scheduled on Friday. And they take a picture, they include them in that interview, they've got video of it, they've got audio of it, and it becomes a part of the story. Then maybe that question asker asks some of those questions to the public official themselves, things like that. On a bigger scale, it might just be that you call up the question asker and you do an interview with them, and you find out a little bit more. Why did you ask this? Why does it matter to you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and you can ask them for a picture, and you can include that picture in your story. You can include a little bit of that background information, and sort of turn your audience member into kind of the hook for the story. Here's why this person was curious, and therefore you should be curious. And so that's a much lower barrier to entry. If you are able to fly a film crew out to wherever they live, people do that. We're starting to work with Morning Edition, the national NPR show, and they're planning on flying their hosts out to sit with their question askers in person, but NPR has the budget for that kind of expedition. So it really depends.
Yeah, brilliant. We're sort of out of time, but if there's one more burning question, we'll probably take it. If not, you're around all day, aren't you?
I'm here all day. I have, I didn't get to the slide, but I have, for anyone, whether you're interested in Hearken or not, I have a checklist of kind of guiding questions for how to do this kind of 360-degree model. I've got hard copies of it. That's just like a useful engagement resource. Yeah. So I'll be standing just right outside the door after, and if you're interested in one of those or just want to talk, please come find me. I'll also, be at the networking lunch, so I'd love to talk more about this.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.